Welcome back, Florida Politics Now. Happy Friday. Glad to be joined by two of our wonderful Gray Media affiliates. It's been a busy week in news, politics-wise, here in Florida. You might know, as we're recording this on Friday, the 10-year anniversary of the Pulse Nightclub shooting, when 49 people lost their lives and countless more left with scars, both visible invisible, around town here in Tallahassee. I'm sure where you are, you'll see the flags at half staff today. Let's go ahead and take a look at a package that we just recorded a few days ago about how our gun laws have changed since Pulse to now.
It was lawmakers from both parties that gathered right here at the Capitol to pass gun reform after Pulse, after Parkland. Things like a 3-day waiting period, emergency red flag laws, raising the age to buy a handgun. But sentiments are starting to swing back the other way, especially from Florida's Attorney General. Florida Attorney General James Uthmeyer says the state's 3-day waiting period between buying a gun and receiving it does not comply with the Second Amendment. Nearing a decade since the Pulse nightclub shooting, the Giffords advocacy group says they're pushing back. They argue Floridians accept sensible gun reform regardless of their party.
Attorney General deciding to roll back one of the most important gun safety measures that's been passed would be tremendously detrimental, and we plan to fight him every inch of the way.
Giffords was formed by Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords, herself a victim of an assassination attempt. They say progress in Florida comes in fits and starts. They believe there's much more acceptance of the LGBT community now than 10 years ago, but at the same time, Congress has only passed one gun reform law this generation.
And social change in this country is uneven and it takes too long, but when it happens, it can happen really quickly. And most of the time, it happens because people don't give up.
Especially after the 2018 Parkland shooting, lawmakers passed bipartisan reform, like red flag laws. But talks in Tallahassee now mostly center around protecting Second Amendment rights. The AG posted on X this week, every government office, including mine, exists to protect your God-given rights as enshrined in the U.S. Constitution. That's why we're settling a case that declares Florida's law unconstitutional. This Saturday, Giffords will host a panel moderated by survivor Brandon Wolf. They'll be joined by the Human Rights Campaign and Equality Florida, among others. You'll be able to find the details for that at RSVP on our website in the future. For now, in Tallahassee, I'm Matt Hoffman.
And Matt, how is
Saturday? We're now talking about Go ahead, Jessica.
Yes, I was going to say, how is the appetite from other lawmakers as far as rolling back some of this? Are you hearing a lot of talk from others?
Yeah, I think the sentiments have now swung back to rolling back much of this, perhaps because of the shock value has worn off, or perhaps sentiments have changed at a national level, but it certainly seems like things are starting to swing back the other way. You know, the settlement could come through anytime, and lawmakers obviously will be back next year, and they could elect to remove some of these other things we have, like the red flag laws and the raising the age to buy a gun. Some of those things certainly could be rolled back.
The what package?
And what about the victims? Have they been coming forward with all these changes, with lawmakers swinging the other direction? Are they speaking out?
Yeah, the victims are certainly speaking out. You know, one of the things they would point to is this 3-day waiting period. What it does, it gives someone who's perhaps suicidal time to cool off, time to think about what comes next. In a domestic violence situation, you also have that same period that allows people to just take a breath, understand their actions. And so many victims that we've spoken with say it's a really powerful part of the law, and they're dismayed that it will be possibly rolled back. In fact, Giffords, who you just heard from there in that story, they plan to fight the Attorney General. They plan to go to court and actually defend the law. So we'll have to see how that shakes out. All right, now let's go to our second story of the week, our second top story. You may have heard about property taxes. It's been all over, certainly our media stations and all over the state. big property tax cuts could be coming. You're going to be able to vote on this in November. But a couple of former Florida mayors say that the language you see on your ballot isn't right. They say it's biased. And so they're suing to try to get the language that you'll see changed. Let's go ahead and take a look at that.
Ron DeSantis pitched a full elimination of homestead property taxes. The legislature, though, dialed that back. But they did propose getting rid of $250,000 worth of non-school property taxes on each home. But a new legal challenge says the language the legislature chose is misleading and could sway voters.
But if the ballot question is biased and inaccurate, well, then the ability to vote becomes a nullity.
The people behind the lawsuit are a former mayor of Stuart, Florida, and a city council member from Key Biscayne. Their lawyers say the ballot language reads like a campaign slogan, not a fair question.
So at the end of the day, this question is a campaign slogan. It's a political flyer. And when people go to vote and they go into the ballot box, they should not be looking at a political flyer.
But remember, just after the special session concluded, House Speaker Daniel Perez said it's important for the voters to decide on their own property tax cuts.
It's property taxes. No one wants taxes. The details of how to come to a final product has been a long road. But I'm proud of the opportunity that we are giving the voters by letting them decide if this is something that's going to come to fruition or not.
The plaintiffs say a Leon County Circuit judge will have to hear the case on an expedited basis, and an appeal all the way to the Florida Supreme Court could be coming.
Now, before we get into questions, guys, we got to pay the bills. Let's go ahead and take our ad break. We'll be right back for more. Welcome back, Florida Politics Now. Let's open up the floor. Questions, please, from your neck of the woods.
So, Matt, my question, because I think that there is some confusion about what all this includes as far as what types of discounts property owners will see, because it does not apply to the school tax, so which is a big part of property tax.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you might recall the governor's original proposal was basically homestead taxes exemption would be raised unlimited, including schools. That is no longer the case, to your point. Schools are still allowed, even if this is to pass, schools are still allowed to tax homestead properties. This also, on top of that, does not apply to businesses, does not apply to rental homes, does not apply to second homes. And so that's one of these things, these keys that the plaintiffs in that lawsuit we just heard about, that's what they want to fix. They want the AG to have to rewrite this to be more explicit about that, about what this proposal does and does not include.
And is there concern that this new lawsuit could jeopardize it being on the ballot in November? I'm hearing no, but who knows what will happen?
Yeah, that's right. No, that's a great question. The answer to this particular lawsuit is no. They're not asking for the property tax issue to just be thrown off the ballot. What they're asking for is for the AG to have to rewrite the language. Of course, in this case, the governor wrote the language, the legislature adopted it and sent it to the voters. The plaintiffs in this case, again, two former mayors of Florida cities, say that it's confusing and that we don't know exactly what's all going into this. So if this lawsuit, even if they win, it will still be on your ballot. I'll tell you, just in general, there are thoughts of other lawsuits as well that perhaps could just challenge the property tax issue as a whole. Those have not been filed yet. This is the only lawsuit that we know of right now, but certainly that could change. It's a long time until November.
We actually talked with our local government here in Bay County, Florida, to see what their thoughts were as far as potential impacts if this were to pass. And they said that on the government level, they were looking at some hiring freezes and possibly even some layoffs if this were to come to fruition, which I thought was really interesting that they're already taking a look at that.
Yeah, and it's been many counties across the, you mentioned Bay County, here in Leon County, they're doing the same, Gadsden County, the same. It would likely result in a freeze in services. They've sort of widened that aperture to allow things like libraries, elections, other constitutional offices. But the fact of the matter is, if you're going to cut the revenue, counties will not be able to provide the same level of service they did before. And so voters are going to be left with basically this choice. Would you like the money more in your pocket if you own a homestead home, or would you like the services that you enjoy? And that's basically going to be the question before them.
And through your reporting, what are you getting? Do you feel like it has a good chance of passing? It seems like it does.
My gut says yes, especially because the legislature has pared down the original proposal. If we think of the original proposal as the pie in the sky proposal or the ultimate goal from the governor's office, the legislature really scaled that back. And so I think that's an indicator that it would pass. It needs, of course, we know here, 60% of the votes in order to pass, not just your usual 50%. Another indicator, I think, is that some Democrats did vote for the proposal despite being pretty ardent opponents of the governor. And I think that could be them reading the tea leaves, seeing which way this might go. But we've seen many, many, many ballot measures in Florida, and it's getting harder and harder to figure out which way the winds are ever going to blow.
Yeah, I think whenever you're dealing with someone's pocketbook and they think, oh, I can save some money, I think that kind of sways them in a lot of cases.
Yeah, especially right now with our economy.
Yeah,
definitely.
Right now, yes, with the economy, the affordability crisis, that's what you hear a lot at the Capitol, that phrase, affordability crisis. And it's true. I mean, look at gas prices, look at grocery prices. It would be hard to look, if you're a homeowner, it would be hard to look at that on the ballot and say no to it. I think that's why the counties, to your point, have a uphill climb to convince people this is your investment. This is what you're getting with that money.
And a question here that just came to mind, if it does pass, And let's say it doesn't work and people say, this isn't working like we thought. What would happen to change it and reverse it?
Yeah, and that's sort of the question we don't really know the answer to. The ballot language or the ballot summary includes language saying the legislature will make a schedule to eliminate property taxes entirely. But what that schedule might look like, when that might occur, we just don't know. I think the sentiment I get at the Capitol is that the reason they pared this back is so that they could see how it's working and then decide if they want to go for the full goal. I think it's just a wait and see approach. And we saw the similar property tax reform in Kansas that ended up getting rolled back because folks didn't get the services they liked. Though, of course, we've seen positive property tax cuts in other states. So we just don't yet know.
It's definitely going to be interesting to see how this
Alrighty, folks.
pans out.
No other question. Yeah, no doubt. We'll have to keep an eye on all of our member stations. Will do exactly that. For now, let's go ahead and we'll say goodbye on this wonderful Friday afternoon. For now, I'm Matt Hoffman. This is Florida Politics Now.